hand. Let's go to item number 78.
Okay.
Because you had indicated you're going to have to leave here at some point.
Yes, and I'll be quick. I just pulled it because I have some background information to pass out to people, and so I wanted to do that. And then I wanted to just briefly speak to the purpose here and point to the fact sheet that I'm passing around, which I think will answer a lot of questions. So I wanted to do that and then just determine if there are any questions that people have today. I'm trying to prepare for Thursday. So this is item number 78. My co-sponsors are Councilmember Poole, Cassar, Renteria, and Mayor Adler. I'm not gonna read all this. I'm just gonna speak to the first 2 points to it to explain it. So basically, this is a resolution that establishes a process. So it's a process oriented resolution. So it establishes a process to pilot immediate shelter and support services for people experiencing homelessness with the intent of providing a pathway to permanent housing. Just quickly, the resolution includes steps in this process and a timeline. The steps are preparation for purchase or lease of a structure. A second is a report detailing the best options for piloting shelter and support services. So basically that means the design of how it would be operated. Last, any necessary City Council spending authorization prior to implementation, and I want to emphasize this. This sets forth a process to get us to a point where we can implement an immediate shelter and support services, but the council would still have to authorize any spending authorization, and the thinking is that the timeline is that would come back to us on our May 23rd council agenda to do that. So the resolution also works towards the end date of beginning shelter operations by September 30th. So it also clarifies that in developing the report, which is the design of the program, the city manager will engage our city staff and the agencies that serve individuals experiencing homelessness now, and we'll collaborate. And this is one of the exciting opportunities here for us in putting together this design, is we'll collaborate with the National Alliance to End Homelessness, who are experts on design of immediate shelter and support services. So that's the basics of it. I would ask my co-sponsors, Councilmember Poole, is there anything that I missed that you would want to add?
Only that this is just one step in the larger effort that we've undertaken and was a priority that we tagged as such last year and that continues.
Yes, and that reminds me, you'll see in the fact sheet, again, without going into all the details, but this is contemplated in the planning documents we've done in the past. And I've cited information here from our Austin Strategic Direction 2023, which is our council strategic plan, from our strategic housing blueprint, from the action plan to end homelessness, as well as just national information from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. So it's in line with what we've been doing up to now, and I just want to stress what I consider the urgency for us to get past planning. We've done lots of planning, so it's time to take action, and I think that this sets out a process for getting to that point. That's a very well thought out process. So Councilmember Poole, you spoke to it. Councilmember Cassar, was there anything that you or the mayor wanted to say, or Councilmember Renteria?
I would like to say something real quick.
Okay.
You know, this has have become a really urgent condition that we're in right now. I had the opportunity to go with some of our police officers to visit some of these locations. And in one site, they were telling people to, in a tunnel, and they were asking people to come out, and there's a big sign saying no trespassing there, but they had petitioned that whole area where each one had their own room. And further back, one person, I guess, either didn't hear the command or whatever, and when the police officers went down, I was there with them, and they told me to step back, and when they went in there, this person reached for a gun, it wasn't a real gun, but it sure looked like it was just like, it was a replica of a real 9mm, and that person almost got shot there because it reached out to grab the gun, and luckily for our police officers, they told her it turned out to be a female, and they told her not to move, and she didn't move. So luckily that she didn't, because she would have probably gotten shot by 3 officers there, and so it's becoming very dangerous down there. There's, besides the homeless situation, there's other people that are transits there that are dealing drugs. There were prostitution that going on in that tunnel also. When one of the girls came out, ladies that came out, she was, you could tell they were doing that. So it's becoming to that point where we really need to address this issue, and that's why I co-sponsored, that resolution.
Yeah,
So
and I would just add that I like you're saying, I think it's way past time that we start taking action. People living on the streets are living in unsafe, unclean situations. It's just not right. We can do better in Austin, and I just passionately feel that it's time we get moving. And so people don't even have a chance to get back on their feet if they don't have a clean, safe, decent place to stay while we're trying to get them permanent housing.
So I want to applaud your leadership
Oh, I'm sorry,
on
I didn't
this.
realize you wanted to say something.
That's okay. I think other people do too.
Okay.
I want to thank you for your leadership on this, because I think that it reflects 2 things. First is that as a council and as a city, we set homelessness as our first priority. So it is the convergence of so many of our local and community values. And we're at a place right now where we have resources that might be available to us that haven't been in the past, and other resources we've identified that we can go get. So it's the highest priority. We're in a position to be able to act, and I agree with you, and I think everyone on this council wants us to actually act to do this. When people would talk about homelessness and the need for temporary housing, it used to be that most of the conversation centered around the arch downtown, but what we're seeing is more and more folks that are raising real red flags in other parts of the town, even more than in the past. On Riverside Drive, I know Councilmember Renteria was out there, at I-35 and the Slaughter overpass, at Manchac and Pack Saddle and Ben White, many other places in our community. And I know that the community is asking for us to actually do something. To that end, I'm really excited that pursuant to the budget session that we had before, we identified kind of a homeless czar that we wanted to bring on to staff. My understanding is that you're going through that interview process now, and we'll shortly have kind of a homeless czar in the city that will have cross-departmental responsibility and power and the ability to be able to marshal and to take a look at and come up with that overarching holistic plan for the city to identify what it is that we need to do. I supported this because as I read it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about my reading of this, but it is asking for us to take immediate action. We need to actually see stuff on the ground. But it doesn't identify yet exactly what that action is, because we have to do a study to see what is the best thing that we could be doing with respect to more immediate action to help with temporary housing for folks. If we just move them, if we just clear an area, it doesn't help anybody because they just move somewhere else because they need a place to be able to live. But folks experiencing homelessness, if we can get them into a home. So it doesn't say what it is, where it is, how it is. I know you make a mention of a fabric membrane structure, but it could either be that, it could be 1,000 other things other than that. We don't know because it hasn't been studied. My hope is that the homeless czar will be in place well before this is happening, and I'm real anxious to hear what the homeless czar and you as the manager think is the appropriate next thing for us to do. Because I'm wide open, so while there's discussion of some specifics in here, just want to make real clear I don't support any of the specific suggestions that are made, because this is broad enough to let staff come back with whatever is the appropriate thing for us to do immediately. It's not tied to a cost yet. We don't know what the costs are, so I would imagine you're going to bring back to us different kinds of proposals that have different kinds of costs for the council to be able to look at and do. Because the council hasn't had any conversations yet about what is the right thing to do for temporary or immediate action as a group. So that's a conversation I really want to be able to participate in and be part of, and be able to vet with folks in the community that I know are interested in this subject, interested in taking immediate action, interested in doing something to find temporary homelessness. And the fact that we're teeing it up and adding that urgency to it, I think, is a really important thing.
Mr. Mayor,
Hang
please.
on a second. I'll give you a
you
chance.
mischaracterized the resolution.
Then I'll give you a chance to fix that, but you can't talk in between everybody that gets a chance to talk. Kathy.
Yeah, I thank you, Councilmember Kitchen and sponsors, for bringing this forward. I think it is, I appreciate, Mayor, what you said about the kind of structure. There's absolutely no doubt that we need more emergency shelter, and we have taken several steps to ask our staff to investigate the possibility of everything from having emergency shelters in city buildings to making sure that we're allocating enough money for this. So we absolutely need emergency shelter. I think one thing that is very important prior to any purchase, and so as the staff go forward and do their analysis, I'd like to really understand what the full costs of a temporary membrane structure would be, because as I understand the costs, I see that there's a fiscal note of $750. I had asked the staff if, when they were making this recommendation back prior to the memo, if they had done a full accounting of the costs, and I heard a number that was quite a bit higher, that at least one of these membrane structures was closer to $2 million. And so I am absolutely ready to make a big investment in emergency shelter, but I think we need a real understanding of the cost of that and the services, so that we can determine whether a membrane structure is really better than using an existing building in terms of quality of the shelter, but also kind of the long-term sustainability of that option. So I would just ask the city manager, I expect this will pass on Thursday, if that can be a key point of investigation, really looking at what that investment will be in total, and whether our investment is best placed in a membrane structure versus an existing building, perhaps even a city-owned building. And I think we have at least one such option.
Ann. Oh, sorry, Leslie, and then Ann.
I guess what I would say is I think we are all intending to move in the same direction on this. I think obviously the author of this resolution and the co-sponsors want to know how much it would cost. That's why we've asked for the input from staff. I think, though, the point that I really want to make here is time is of the essence, and I think that is the piece that Ann is really trying to get at with this particular resolution. We have been working on this topic for really diligently since last year, when we created this as one of our main strategic outcomes. This was the top issue that we determined, I think, even before Spencer came to work here with us in December of 16, I think, or maybe it was 17. I'm losing the years, but I think you're coming up on 1 year with us, right? So aside from all of the various comments here this morning, I hear that everybody is very supportive of this. We want to do it right. We want staff to tell us the specifics that we can't line up ourselves, and then we will move forward with something, but it needs to be done expeditiously. That's the piece I don't want to lose.
Ann.
Yes, what I meant to say is that I don't want to leave the impression that this is a wide open resolution to just come back and tell us to do anything. It is very focused, but there's a lot of flexibility in it, as Councilmember Tovo pointed out. The purpose of it is immediate shelter connected to permanent housing. So it's pretty clear that that's what we're talking about, is immediate shelter connected to permanent housing. But how that is done, there are a lot of questions about, as Councilmember Tovo pointed out, whether a membrane structure is the most appropriate, whether it's an existing structure, whether it's some other kind of structure, and that's written into the resolution to make it clear that there's the flexibility to consider that. It's also written into the resolution, it's referenced as a report, but that's actually the design of the structure and the services. And so there are a number of things mentioned in that are subjects to address, such as the cost, and such as the parameters and scope of services and how to best connect people to services, and to do that in conjunction with the agencies and the National Alliance. So, but it's not prescriptive. In other words, we need to understand from the agencies and from the National Alliance and, staff and others, what's the best way to do this. But I didn't want to leave the impression that this is a resolution just asking us, what do we do next about homelessness? That's not what it is. It's a resolution about, for a process for how do we best move forward and what's appropriate for immediate shelter and services to connect people to permanent housing. So I just wanted to, I didn't want to confuse the public about, it's not redoing what we've already done in terms of our homeless report, our ECHO report, or any of that kind of stuff. So that's what I meant. I just wanted to make that clear.
Correct.
And I actually think that both of you are actually closer to the same page than might have been suggested, because my understanding, and I would love anybody to contact me if my understanding here is wrong, is that there's pretty strong consensus that we need to get folks into shelter and get them into permanent housing and have the services necessary to do that, and that much of the questions that people have asked, which I think is what the mayor was referencing, and Councilmember Tovo, is how do we do that? How do we do that quickly? And so I'm supporting the resolution because it doesn't predetermine how we will do that. It does quickly ask for a report on how to do that, and I believe we'll have the homelessness challenge czar in time as that report gets finalized and put together. To me, I think a big part of the struggle is that it's so urgent. There are really urgent human needs that we need to address, but this is also so important that we can't do it wrong, and we have to be able to figure out how to do both, because it is a significant failure on our part if we dedicate resources in a way that doesn't, such scarce resources in a way that doesn't really help people get into permanent housing. So I hope that we get the report back as quickly as we can, and that it's right, and that we end up having to change our budget priorities or do whatever we have to do to get it done. At the same time, I believe that it's really important for us as a community, to feel really good about what comes back. And if it takes us a few weeks or whatever it is after the report comes back for us to really debate and figure out what is right, then I am comfortable. I like that the timeline is aggressive because it's an urgent problem. At the same time, I'm not. I just want to make it really clear that obviously all of us want to make sure that we do the right thing with this. For me, one of the big questions when the resolution was posed to me, and I worked through this with the sponsor, was just how it is that we're going to have the dollars to properly run it. But if the answer to that is we have to rearrange things, or we have to budget differently, or whatever we have to do, then we can try doing that. And in the end, if we can't find a way to do that, then there always is the budget cycle upcoming or other creative ways to get funding. But in the end, if what we're really asking for is how do we get folks into shelter and into permanent housing, it seems that there is a consensus that that's an important thing to do. And so I honestly think that actually, but both the mayor and the sponsor of the resolution said to me both ring true.
I'm going to go back and look at the tape to see what I said that was different, because I agreed with what you said when you started, and I agreed what you said after I spoke. But I'll go back and look at the tape to see if I said something different. Paige.
I am glad to see that this is coming to us. Thank you so much for sponsoring it, and thank you for the other co-sponsors. I just want to be an added voice of advocacy for addressing which location it might be in, concerning what opportunities are available. But oftentimes, especially for District 5 and District 8, people are leaving the downtown area because it's a bit safer for them to be a little bit out of the mix, but also to advocate for women, because some of the opportunities we have for women to find shelter like this are narrower because of that safety issue. And I want to make sure that we are considering that and remembering that. But I'm excited to see what we can do moving forward.
Talia?
I think that's a great idea. Maybe an amendment could be added that addresses that. I don't know, just so it's concentrated on the women part of it. But anyway, what was my question? Oh, yes. Kathy, you mentioned a location that you thought. Could you expand on what that was?
I think that
We had asked staff to look at some different opportunities, and so going back to that research, I think, is helpful.
Okay.
And I can talk to you more about that specific after.
Okay. It just mentions the resolution not directly adjacent to existing residential neighborhoods. So I was curious, I guess, what the definition of not directly adjacent to that.
Well, it also adds the sentence that, unless the,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that was just to recognize that there may be some areas that are more appropriate than others to have it. And I didn't want to put a definition on it because I don't want to be prescriptive about that. I really think it's important that the group that's coming together to design the report for us is able to think through that and provide recommendations. So.
And was your vision of what is reported back to provide a menu of locations, or for it to be one?
Well, my thought, again, I didn't want to be prescriptive. I can tell you what I would imagine, but and in talking with the agencies, I would think that perhaps they might bring us back a range of options.
Okay.
But again, I didn't want to be prescriptive about that. I wanted to leave that to that group because because they're experts in the area, and they may come back and say, really, this is really the best place, and we suggest you do this. Or they may come back and say that we have a range of options, both in terms of the structures and the place. I expect that they would be pretty specific in terms of what's absolutely necessary. In the conversations we've had so far, that connection to permanent housing is a key point. We don't want to just create a shelter where that's not integral in terms of services. So, but beyond that, I didn't want to put too much in terms of parameters on it.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Kathy?
I have a quick question for the sponsor. Councilmember Kitchen, when we were talking about the purpose of the analysis and the report, you mentioned design of the structure, or you mentioned design, and it wasn't clear to me whether you were talking about designing the structure or designing how it would fit into services. I don't know if the design is the right term, but basically the way this is set up is there are a couple of steps, and the report has to detail how an immediate shelter would be operated in terms of services, but integral to that is what it looks like, how it sets up. So the point that you were asking about whether a membrane structure or a permanent structure is better, all of it, I consider that like this. I mean, you can't really say that we want to design the services and how we're going to operate it over here in isolation and not understanding what kind of space you need, both in terms of the structure itself and the location. So I consider that all integral. So Okay.
if I didn't mean to, I don't know if I was using the right words. I didn't mean to imply that it was. I really think they have to take all of that into account together.
Okay, I think thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure we weren't asking staff to design a structure in the literal term, because as I see it, we're asking, and as I think our conversation has yielded, we're asking you to look at the available options of shelter before resting on what the right outcome is there.
Okay. Anything else? Ready to move on? Okay, we'll move on.